Thank you once again, and I will try to remember to use the term intermediaries. If you hear me lapse and say agents, it is one and the same, but I think we might have some ideas for you, what we do in the United States with these processes. So we're going to talk about market conduct, and that includes also the acts of the intermediaries in the United States. I think this is a subject that is very close to my heart. I chaired the National Market Conduct group for the entire United States, so and I have participated, gone out on site for these examinations. I have served subpoenas on intermediaries and sat on the floor in their file rooms looking through all of their records. So I have vast experience in this area. Obviously, the core principles, 18 and 19, whereas in 18, it is the requirement to have the conduct of the insurance intermediaries. And then in 19, we're talking about the companies themselves. In the United States, if you can follow our circle here, you will notice the process starts when we have an application for a professional to become an intermediary or an agent. And with that, they have to include an application, and there is a background check. This can include fingerprints, and we're looking for any prior acts of criminal activity so that we can do a proactive, keep them from the marketplace before they ever get started. Then they also have to complete the examination, and there is a different examination for each line of insurance. They can go take as many exams if they want. They can have a life license, a health license, property and casualty, etc. They can have many, or they can have the one. After the examination, there's one circle that's been left out, and that is the proof of financial responsibility. Every intermediary in the United States has to have a bond or an errors and omissions insurance policy that will cover their actions. Now, I will specify that this is only for non-fraudulent activity, maybe unintentional consequences. For example, you take an application, you put it in a file folder, and you forget to submit it to the insurance company. You know, those type where it is a non-intentional, non-fraudulent activity. And that errors and omissions coverage would go into place to make the consumer whole in that case. Then we get into the company appointments. In the United States, we have two types of agents. We have what we call captive agents. These are agents that might work specifically for one insurance company. They only sell for that one company and its sister companies. The other type we have are called independent intermediaries or agents. They can be appointed by one company, 10 companies, 100 companies. They're called an independent agent, and they work in that capacity. And they have the responsibility that if a customer is seeking coverage, they will shop and price that coverage with the various companies they have appointments with to find the best policy for that individual. We come around to continuing education. And also, with the examinations, in the United States, those examinations are continuously updated. In Kentucky, every year we update our examinations. We do that to keep up with new statutes that have been passed, new legislation, and also due to the evolving marketplace. The continuing education, that is an additional course. With the intermediaries in the United States, you hear sometimes moaning and groaning over this. I've sold insurance now for 30 years. What can I learn that's new? I know everything there is about the industry. But as we've just spoken, a new product has come to bear called cyber insurance. and protection with that. There are constantly developments, particularly with the health insurance marketplace in the United States. Those involvements, there's new changes every year. So continuing education is required. If that education is not met, the license will be revoked. Simple as that. We go on to the broad authority, enforcement authority. And I want to talk about this a few minutes because just as my friend from Brazil said, the professional good agents want to keep the bad characters, the bad, irresponsible agents off the street. How do we find out when there is a non-professional, a bad intermediary? One of the first ways we hear is through consumer complaints. We find consumers might call and say that Mr. Jones or Mrs. Brown had this problem, and we start investigating. Now, I will tell you folks, if that agent has done something bad with one customer, there's going to be more than one. I have never found the case where there was misrepresentation or a problem just with one customer. So when that is the case, and we have proof, we issue a subpoena, and that's when we go out on site and start checking the records. Now, one of the advantages that I have, and I think that this is the case in many states, and it's a very powerful weapon, I have independent subpoena authority. I do not have to go to the courts to get a subpoena. I can have subpoenas to get records from banks to find out if there's been misappropriation of dollars. I can get subpoena authority over many entities that I would not necessarily have any type of authority over. It is a strong tool, and if that is something, I would suggest that you have that in your weapon arsenal, if you can get it. So, another way that we find out about bad agents is an insurance company might terminate that intermediary or agent. And why does that happen sometimes? Well, sometimes it's a case where they have done something improper, the intermediary has. The insurance company wants to quietly revoke their appointment, but they don't want to publicly acknowledge what has happened. So in the United States, anytime an insurance company terminates the appointment of an agent, they are required to give the reason, whether premium was stolen, and it could be simply that they didn't meet their quotas or whatever, but they are required to submit to that department the reason why that appointment was terminated. And the reason that that is important, if this was a bad intermediary for Company A, and Company A got rid of them, we want to have a record so when they join Company B, that we know that there's a problem with that agent. Again, it's a very strong. We also have both civil investigations and criminal investigations. In my state, I have insurance fraud investigators, and we can simultaneously run investigations both on the civil side and the criminal side. And this could end up in being no findings. It could end up in being put on probation. It could be put up having fines. It could have revocation, or it could end up with being put in prison if the events are serious enough. So again, that is a very powerful tool because these investigations can run simultaneously. Then we come back around to their licensing renewal. And obviously, again, this is done every 2 years in my state. And again, they have to prove that continuing education has been met. They have to prove that they still have the financial responsibility. So it is a cycle that we have, and it has served us well. But let me tell you another weapon for your arsenal. It is my favorite statute of all of the statutes that I have in my insurance code. And that book is about that thick. We have statutory language in Kentucky that says that the insurance companies can be held responsible for the acts of their appointed agents. And you can see why that can be beneficial. The insurance company has a vested interest then to make sure that that agent acts appropriately. And also, if it's a case where an agent has stolen money, that, remember, their errors and omissions or their bonding will not, that was an intentional fraud, that would not cover that. In Kentucky, I can go back to the insurance company that they were acting on their behalf and make sure that the consumer is made whole. So I'm going to tell you that is a very strong statutory, and it is a wonderful weapon. And it also, as I said, it makes the insurance company have more of a oversight of its agents, and they also have a little bit more on the line should there be bad actions. Now let's talk about the business standards and the conduct of business here. As you will see on this slide, the first line is the Unfair Trade Practices Act. This is language that we have throughout the United States that are expectations on the insurance company. The first is prohibits misrepresentations. The advertising, all of the forms, all of the contracts have to be filed with the Department of Insurance to make sure that they meet statutory and regulatory, that they meet with approval. We even have it so specific that we dictate the size font that the contract has to be written in. You know, that old saying about the small font that you couldn't read the small. We even have standards with that. So that is part of that. Also, the prohibits unfair discrimination. Obviously, there's various classes of people, but we are just trying to make sure that an insurance company is not discriminating based on age, gender, you know, their credit, income. So it's standards that must be met. The second line is the Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act. I will tell you, for our attorneys and our legal counsel, this is their area that they like to pursue, because this is the area where if they found that there were many, many problems with a certain insurance company, that they can file additional litigation and cite the Unfair Claims Settlement Act. That requires a good faith settlement. That means that we're having to have adequate settlement. It's being done in a timely fashion. You're not dragging out the customer. You're not erecting obstacles to the conclusion of that claim settlement. And as it goes along with it, the prompt settlement of claims. To give additional motivation in our statutes, we have interest charges onto the claim settlement. And when, in this day and age, with the interest rate in Kentucky, there is a 12% interest charge if there has been proof that the claim has been not settled timely. That is a pretty good incentive to try to go ahead and get that done. And then the last one there is the Improper Terminations Act. There are specific notice requirements. If an insurance policy is being canceled, there has to be for certain reasons. There has to be time frames in which to do this. In Kentucky, we have the longest time frames of any jurisdiction in the United States. The consumer must be given 60 days notice of a termination of a policy. And that's a long time, but it gives the consumer plenty of time to shop to get additional coverage. And then the premium refund, the unearned premium. If they terminate a policy and the premium has been paid, we have to make sure that they return what we call unearned premium. So these are standards that we have that serve us well. Now let's talk about market conduct. I'm not going to ask how many industry representatives we have in the audience today, but in the United States, when you mention the word market conduct, it kind of sends shivers down the insurance company's spine. And let me tell you why. Just as the financial examinations are looking at the financials of the company, the market conduct examination is looking at every other aspect of the business operation. They're looking at how do they settle claims. They're looking at their advertising. They're looking at how they appoint agents. They're looking at how taxes are paid. It is an extremely comprehensive process. The other interesting thing about that, it is the insurance companies that pay to be examined, okay? And it is not pleasant. You're not only paying their salary, you're paying for their living expenses. So it's not unusual to have 2 or 3 examiners to go to a company. They might be there, depending upon what they're reviewing, they might be there for 3 months, 6 months, and the company is having to pay for their salary and their living expenses for that. So it is a good tool. And then usually, after their activity, there has been a fine and some other action that's taken. When we look, market analysis is the first thing that we do. In the United States, we're going more to this, we have limited resources. You don't need to go into that company that isn't doing things right. So we're trying to be more proactive and if not schedule just a routine examination of a company. If there's not been any issues, there's not been complaints, there's not been any problems with their filings that they make, if we're not hearing anything from other states of problems, we try to just do an analysis up front. What we're looking for are the outliers, those that are not typical, the ones that are taking extra time to delay claims, the ones that are not, that their advertising is questionable. They're advertising in states where they're not licensed to do business, those type of issues. The market conduct examinations, there's 2 types. There is the comprehensive exam, where we're looking at all of this. We're looking at the company operations, filing, record retention, complaint. How did they handle complaints? We're looking at their licensing appointments, policyholder service. And we also have what we call target exams. Now let's go back to the comprehensive exams. We have national standards on errors tolerance level, okay? And it is for about 10 different classifications that they're looking at. And what these examiners do, let's say that they have a fairly healthy book of business in Kentucky. Based on the amount of premium they write, the examiners go in, they start randomly pulling files, just a random search. Then each of those files they go through to make sure that all of these processes have been upheld. They will randomly pull maybe 100 claims that have been paid to make sure they've been paid. They'll pull policies to make sure those agents that issued those policies were licensed and appointed. So it is a random, truly a random search. So we can't be accused of looking at something in particular. However, the target exams, we are looking for something specifically. And I'll give you an example. Recently, it was brought to my attention in Kentucky that I had a health insurance company that seemed to take longer to reimburse what we call independent pharmacies, not part of the big chains. You know, they weren't part of the CVS or the Rite Aid or the Walgreens. They were small mom and pop independent pharmacies. I got some evidence that this was happening, so I sent my examiners in, and they looked specifically at those claims payment. And yes, we found out that they were doing this. It resulted in a fine to the tune of about $100,000, as well as an order. And anytime we take action against companies like this, it goes on a national database where we track all of this. So another state could see that I took action against XYZ company for how they were paying independent pharmacies. So you know what? They might want to look at that aspect in their state as well. It is a wonderful tool to have. The investigations, again, we get these quite frequently. A lot of times it's on claims payment. And it's amazing how we can find delays in paying claims. And guess what? They indicate that there's problems with some of those financial solvency, the cash flow. So financial and market conduct can work independently. Also, with the investigations, we have the capability to hire outside experts, again, at the cost of the insurance company. Our most recent example, and you all might have heard it on the news, we have a well-known health insurance company called Anthem in the United States that had a cyber breach. It impacted 70 million people. Okay, that's a lot of people to have your personal identity and personal information. In my state alone, it impacted 2.3 million people out of 4.6 million. So you're sure I am very concerned about this. All of the states and all the jurisdictions in the United States, our territories, we have all gone together to have one examination of Anthem. We have lead states that will be leading this operation, but instead of each state going in there and looking at these problems, we have agreed, my faith and my sister states, to do it. But we're not experts. We don't have the expertise at NAIC to look at the cyber. So in addition to Anthem paying for all of this examination, they're going to have to pay for cyber technology experts, and it's not cheap. If you all want to give a good occupation to your children, you know, you always talked about actuaries, how much money they make. Cyber people are going to be in high demand for the years to come. So anyway, but and then the consumer complaint part, that is my heavy hitter. I can get several complaints on a particular issue. I immediately tell the company I'm sending in an examiner, and I get it taken care of. Market conduct, just as we've talked about financial solvency and financial exams being important, a good market conduct program is some of the best tools you can have. It would be nice if everyone played by the rules. You pass your laws, you pass your regulations, and we do not just assume that they're going by it. We're going to make sure, and that's done through the market conduct. So I know that it is an area of interest here, you know, with how we do the market conduct accreditation or market conduct. But, you know, it is, I cannot emphasize enough what a strong tool it is that you can have as a regulator. So again, I thank you for your kind invitation, and I thank you for that. And if you want any additional information on this subject, we'll be happy to help. Thank you.